This will be a demonstration of the WebEx Contact Center Management Portal. We're starting out here on the WebEx Control Hub because, as we saw in the previous video, some of the initial configurations of our WebEx Contact Center environment are set up here within the Control Hub, and more of the configuration will roll over to the Control Hub. But for now, most of the configuration is done under the Management Portal. As I click into Contact Center, again, under the Settings area, if you scroll to the bottom, this gives you a link to get you directly to the WebEx Contact Center Management Portal. So I'll go ahead and click on that now. As I get into the Management Portal, you're first greeted with a number of dashboards. And you can scroll down the screen to be able to see more of these. And you can click on any of them to expand them out into their own separate browser tab to look at them or work with them further. And using this pull down, you can see that we have multiple types of dashboards available to us just to give us a high-level view of our contact center environment. As you can see on the site level dashboard, we've got information about the number of calls that are in IVR right now or in queue, how many are connected to agents, and also available agents on the calling front. And we can also see other IVR and voice-specific call detail information right here. Looking at a couple of other dashboards, we can see here the Contact Center Overview Real-Time, showing us up-to-date statistics about all of our channels, perhaps the number of contacts into each one and what the average service level was, contacts handled, abandoned, etc., etc. And under the Contact Center Overview Historical, this is a similar view as what we saw in the real-time, except that in this case, you can go ahead and change the duration that you wanted, perhaps wanting to look at last month's contact center statistics. Now on the left-hand side, these are the selectable elements of the configuration that we can go into, but you can also click on this icon right here to go ahead and expand those out so you can see the text at all times until you get familiar with which ones are associated with which icon. We'll take a look at the routing strategy in a few minutes, but I wanted to start off on provisioning first. Here you can see a number of the elements that are required to be configured within the contact center environment to be able to set this up. Looking at the users first, these are the users that were actually set up through the WebEx Control Hub, in our case imported from Active Directory, and then were synchronized from Control Hub over to the WebEx Contact Center Management Portal as you see here. I can use the search location to type in specific information, such as my dCloud ID, to see my agents Sandra and Rick right here. And clicking on the ellipsis, this affords me the other actions that I can do when looking at any of the elements. In this case here, I'll click on the view. Now in our demonstration environment, we are set up as a read-only administrator to make sure that we don't make any changes in our environment, as it will affect demonstrations. But here we can show you some of these and how they were set up for an idea of what things look like within the WebEx Contact Center Management Portal. And you can see that after this agent was imported, we needed to go turn them on as Contact Center enabled, make their status active, and in here is where we assign them to specific team, and also assign the skill, agent, and multimedia profiles that would be associated with this agent user account. Clicking under Teams, we can see here the teams that have been defined in the system, and again, you've got a search button here in case you're looking for a specific team, and I'll have a look at my team associated with my ID. And you can see here the agents that have been assigned underneath this team, and also the desktop layout, multimedia profile, and skill profiles associated with this specific team. Under multimedia profiles, as we click into one of these, you can see that this is a location where you can go ahead and define profiles, defining if these will be blended agents, blended real-time, or exclusive. And you can define how many numbers of each type of contact an agent that has this multimedia profile will be able to receive. And then underneath the teams, you define which multimedia profile is associated with each team. And some of these are expandable as you see under skills. And under skills is where we would have defined our skills that could be assigned to teams and combine those into a skill profile. And changing the focus over to entry points and queues, we can use this pull down right here to show some of the things that were configured, such as the queues. And again, have a look at specific queues. In our case, we'll take a look at the email queue. And we can see the queue routing strategy. For example, this one's longest available agent, and the teams that were associated to this specific queue, as well as service threshold settings and maximum time in queue, etc. Now looking under entry point, an entry point is a location where a contact comes into the WebEx Contact Center environment. Your environment will have entry points for voice, chat, email, and other means of reaching out to you. And again, having a look at the entry point for my ID, we could see some of the configuration in here, such as since this was a chat entry point, we can see that it is going to be using a chat template that was defined within the Cisco WebEx Control Hub, specifically this assigned chat template. So you can see how the WebEx Contact Center Management Portal and the WebEx Control Hub are tied together and what is specifically set up here within the Management Portal. And for this entry point, you can see which queue has been assigned to it. Having a look at entry point mappings, this is going to show you the phone numbers that have been defined within the system and their mapping to the entry points. So when a customer dials this phone number right here, we know that that will be a mobile caller coming in, or this phone number, we're going to send it to our Cumulus voice entry point. Which brings us over to routing strategies. Once you have your entry points defined, you then need to set up routing strategies for each one. You can see here there are a number of things that can be set up underneath the routing strategies, such as routing strategy information, flow scripting, as well as the import of things such as audio files for the interactive voice response, predefined emails, and predefined chat responses. And using this pull down for the entry point, again, we can use keyword search. So I'll go ahead and take a look at this Cumulus voice entry point. And click on the ellipsis to bring it up into the viewer. So here we can see some of the things that were set up about this entry point, specifically its name and its status, as well as its start and end dates. So we can define how long this will be active until, and we can also define the days of the week that it will be active. In this case here, we see that it's active 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. But in some cases, you may want to define specific days of the week that this will be available, and specific start and end times that it is available as well. For a voice call, you can also define which file to play for customers whether on hold. And you also decide which flow you want assigned to this voice routing strategy. And we'll take a look at what we mean by flows in a few minutes. And as we saw with our voice routing strategy, this was tied to a flow. Here under flows, here's where you can go ahead and click into it to see the voice routing scripts that you have defined within the system. We'll go ahead and take a look at this WebEx Contact Center dCloud voice flow, again in a view-only mode. As I bring up this flow within the Flow Designer, you can see that on the left we have our library of elements that we can drag onto the palette and create our connections by using the connector elements between each of the nodes. And then on the right-hand side, you see any of the information associated with a specific node that you click on within our working design. This first one is showing all of the custom flow variables that we've defined within the system, as well as the predefined variables that are automatically built, which you can use as you're doing any of the routing between the elements or doing data lookup. And you can expand the screen on the right-hand side by clicking on the X or clicking on this. In the main screen, you can also zoom in or zoom out and pan as you need to. And again, as we look at our script here, we can see that there are a lot of different nodes that you might add into your environment to have it do exactly what you need to do. Again, you use these from the left-hand library selectors, and there are more down below, and more will be added over time as well. Let's go ahead and take a look into a few of these nodes to see how they're set up. As I click into this Get User Information HTTP Request node, you can see how it was set up with a name, an HTTP request setting of authenticated. And here we pick the connector that was defined within the WebEx Control Hub that you saw in a previous demo. And from the server defined within the connector, we can see the path for the data that we're querying on. And we can see in this case that it's going to use one of the predefined system variables, such as the caller's automatic number identifier, or ANI. We can see the request types. In this case here, it would be a GET, and then any of the other variables associated as well. And based on the response that we get, we will parse for certain information and store this as our own variable. So based on the phone number the person dialed from, we'll do a database query, and via the response from that database, we'll use what it gave us for the first name and then put it into our own output variable first name to be able to use that later on, perhaps during the interactive voice response in greeting the customer, as you'll hear in our customer and agent demonstration later on in another video. And speaking of that greeting, if I click on the welcome message, you can see as I click on any node, that changes the right-hand side to bring up the details about that node. In this welcome message, we're going to use the Google TTS Cloud connector to do speech to text and greet this customer. We're going to greet them with this language, although there are a number of languages that are selectable that we could use within the TTS environment. And this is the text that we'll greet them with. We'll say hello, followed by a TTS readback of the variables that we had stored for their first name and last name. And this expression can be written in raw text or SSML. And as I remove this message information right here, you can see from the screen that these can be very robust and detailed IVR scripts with menus or submenus playing other messages, allowing you to find out exactly what the customer needs and getting them through the right contact center queue. And here under Event Flows, this is where you can define other actions, such as what happens when an agent answers a call. Perhaps you might want to go ahead and pop a web application or CRM right up onto the agent desktop. And you do that just by connecting the elements and then editing this node, putting in specific details that will be associated with the node, and in this case, will pop right up as a call is handled by an agent. So clicking back over to the WebEx Contact Center Management Portal screen, you can feel free to have a look around and click into any of these and have a look at some of these configuration parameters, as well as some of the dashboards and some of the other parts of the management portal. I hope this gave you a good, quick overview of the WebEx Contact Center Management Portal. Thank you.